everyone, I'm Claire. I'm the teen librarian here at EVPL Central.
And I am Sierra Pandy. I am the business librarian who happens to have a background in art. January not only starts the new year, it brings us the release of winners like the Caldecott Awards. The prestigious Randolph Caldecott Award Medal is awarded to the illustrator of the preceding year's most distinguished American picture book for children.
For many years now, EVPL has celebrated the Caldecott Awards by hosting our own mock Caldecott. Over the course of a year, we gather the titles of the year's best of the best children's books based on trusted book reviews. Then, every January, the EVPL youth staff gather to discuss quality art in children's books and vote on our favorite. Let's take a look at some of the selections for mock Caldecott that use traditional illustration mediums. These include things like pencil, pen and ink, watercolor, wash, acrylic, charcoal, lithography, woodcutting, collage, and so much more.
The Blue House, written and illustrated by Phoebe Wall. This picture book was illustrated using watercolor, gouache, which is more opaque and has a thicker consistency than watercolor, and finally, colored pencil. The illustrations, which are richly colored and imperfect, have a handmade quality that we often associate with folk art. This style elicits feelings of warmth that I would personally relate to something like an old family scrapbook. The Oldest Student, How Mary Walker Learned to Read, written by Rita Lorraine Hubbard and illustrated by Caldecott winner Olga Mora. This picture book was illustrated using acrylic paint, China marker, colored pencil, patterned paper, and book clippings. The use of patterns, textures, and shapes in combination with the vibrant colors serve as a great example of the beauty of collage. The powerful and uplifting narrative is perfectly paired and supported by the more elementary yet stunning visuals. Nesting, written and illustrated by Henry Cole. This picture book was illustrated using micron pens and acrylic paint. The realistic style of Cole's illustrations are made more visually captivating through his use of design, perspective, and basic color contrast. This includes the use of full to two-page spreads, panels like you'd see in a comic book, and vignettes, as well as a variation of close-up and far-away viewpoints. The use of black ink in contrast with the subtle to more vibrant blues captures the viewer's eye and guides it across each page.
Together, Claire and I have come up with a collaborative illustration that she will be finishing traditionally and I will be finishing digitally. So we're going to be moving on to Claire's part where you get to see the process of a sketch going from start to finish with the traditional medium.
All right, so as you can see, I already have the illustration sketched out on my watercolor paper here. So what I'm going to do first is tape it down onto a piece of smooth cardboard or some smooth, a little bit thicker, some type of surface that you can basically tape it down so you can keep things nice and clean and organized. So here are some of the things I'll be using to color and line my illustration. This is definitely a more traditional method of illustrating as opposed to Sierra's digital illustration, which she will be showing in the next video. But I have a few different watercolor products here. I have tube watercolors, which are really nice to use when you're wanting a richer pigment. They have a kind of toothpaste quality when you squeeze them out of the tube. I also have a pan watercolor set here, which is kind of hidden under the paint tray. And I found that those are really nice to have when traveling or when I want to do what is called en plein air, which is a French term and means the act of painting outdoors. Everything that you need aside from water and brushes is right there. They come in hard, dry little cakes, and like with all watercolor, you just add water. My only issue with these is that it can be more difficult to build up a richer pigment, and it doesn't really spread or cover as much surface as you would typically get with the tube or liquid watercolors. I also have watercolor pencils here, which I really like to use on character illustrations like this one because they're great for more targeted shading and blending, which you'll see me do in the video coming up. One of the things I don't have pictured here, but I will be using are Copic markers or Copic. I feel like everyone pronounces it differently. But these are alcohol-based markers, so quite different from our watercolors. The nice thing about these is that they are alcohol-based, which makes them really great for blending. The alcohol in the marker doesn't soak into paper like water does, so that means that the pigment or color can move more easily across the surface of whatever paper or material you're using. They also dry really quickly, which can be a good and bad thing depending on what you're trying to do. And finally, I have multi-liners, which are the pins. I have some Copic and Prismacolor brand multi-liners, which are both very common and popular among illustrators and artists. So these are the best thing to use, in my opinion, when you're wanting a more consistent line flow and precision. They come in a variety of nib sizes, nib being just the tip where the ink comes out, from very small to a brush type. And again, it just depends on what you're wanting from them and want them to do. So I've also used Sharpie pens and basic ballpoint pens, but since I'm wanting to go for a little higher quality with this illustration, I'm going to go on ahead and use the Copic Prismacolor liners. So let's get started. So I'm getting started by doing a light rough wash over the entire piece using a combination of my tube watercolors. A wash is basically just a somewhat transparent layer of color applied with diluted paint. I'm doing this to help create a light base or background color and to help me build layers of color as I keep going. Once everything has dried completely, I'm going to use one of my multi-liners or inking pen to line my pencil sketch. Some people might choose to start with color and line everything at the end, but I personally like to work within crisp, defined lines. At this point, I'm going to erase any pencil lines that are left so we can start coloring. I'm using a combination of Copic markers and watercolor to fill in the major parts of my illustration here. So you can use whatever color scheme you want. I'm going with a kind of winter theme, so I'm doing a lot of blues and some greens and yellows, which don't necessarily fit with a winter theme, but I dig it. Next, I'm going to go in with my watercolor pencils, and to add a little more depth and a little more vibrancy to the color, I'm going to kind of add some shading. So I'm doing this around the edges of their clothes, just on the edges of everything, and anywhere where you might find a natural shadow, like where there's a crease or a fold in fabric. I'm not really too concerned with doing accurate shadows, but just to add a little more depth and vibrancy of the color, that's kind of what I'm going for here. So now that I've gone in with my watercolor pencils, I am just going to take a water brush filled with just simple water. And a water brush is basically a hollow paintbrush that you can add water to. You could add liquid watercolor to it and paint using those directly, but I just like to use them with water to blend watercolors and specifically watercolor pencils. So that is what I am doing here, and I'm going in with paper towel to kind of dab areas where I want it to be a little lighter. So now I am going to focus on the background. As I said earlier, I'm kind of going for a winter theme here. Obviously, the critters are all dressed in their winter gear. And so I'm going in with a Copic marker to darken the circle in the background, and that's going to serve the whole design was to have these critters hanging out in a kind of snow globe, a winter snow globe. So I'm going in and darkening things. And blending with some different light blues and grays. Now I'm going back in with my watercolor pencils using some darker blues around the edges and throughout the body of the snow globe background to add some darker shading to really help it stand out against the blue wash in the background. So once again, I'm going in with my water brushes to activate the watercolor pencils. So as you can see, I'm using those to blend the watercolors, and it creates this really nice deep blue that serves my nice snow globe aesthetic here. So in an attempt to accentuate the fact that this is a snow globe, I'm adding some white watercolor, kind of like how light reflects on glass. And then I'm going in my text here, and I am adding snow caps to the text, so I'm using white watercolor paint there as well. And then I'm going into my snow globe, because as we know, snow globes have snow, and I'm just kind of speckling with a paintbrush to get that kind of snow effect. You can add as little as much as you want if you were to do something similar. But yeah. And finally, I'm just going in and cleaning up some of my lines with one of my multi-liners, just to make sure that everything is still nice and clean and popping. And here is our completed illustration. It is winter-themed snow globe. I suppose most snow globes are winter themed, but ours has some adorable book-loving critters. All of this was done using traditional mediums like watercolor and pen and ink. And don't forget to stay tuned for part 2, where we'll be highlighting some of our top combination and fully digitally illustrated picture books for this year's Mock Caldecott. And Sierra will be demonstrating how to finish the illustration we just created using digital methods. Thanks for watching!